been a Naras, where we discuss all things Latin and writing and books.
I'm Rachel Cunning, and I live on a mountain with super amazing, fast, reliable, high speed mountain internet.
Not fast. I'm Ariane Belzer-Carroll, and I don't live on a mountain, but I do have slightly faster internet. And
Slightly? Only
slightly. And I am really excited to talk about showing versus telling today.
Yes, and that is our story. Our story is showing versus telling.
It is, and it's a really big question. The how do you make a story come to life? What does it mean to show and not tell? It's a phrase that gets thrown around like it's compelling, but it's so hard to talk about. People get really, really trapped in just like describing the events that they know are happening and stating the events that they know are happening instead of letting the scenes unfold. You can think of it like an accordion paper, like you fold it up and like here's the overview, but you need to be able to like pull it apart so you can see the whole picture. When we read, at least when I do, you probably do too, you notice telling. You go, ooh, this sounds really wooden. This sounds overly expository. This doesn't sound real. That wouldn't happen. But when you're writing it in a different language, it can be really hard to see.
Yes, because writing in a different language is hard enough anyway. There's so much going on with our noggins and our monitors and like what kind of mistake and what kind of vocabulary and what do I want the children to learn. And then you have to also say, wait, I'm telling a story. Let's make sure that I'm telling a story and I'm not just listing or describing events and scenes, because they end up kind of like flat. And you really want a reader to be invested in the story and in the characters. When I when I was reading your book Dido, I got like angry on behalf of one of your characters, and you want to feel the character. Yeah, I know. I was like, so you want to feel the characters and get a little invested in them. And making sure the kids are invested is a great way to keep them reading. And we give them, I give my kids time to do reading 3 times a week for like 7 minutes at each middle school. That's been about perfect for them. And you want them to keep wanting to read. So making sure that we're incorporating as many narrative elements as we can help the kids be engaged. But that's really hard for teachers of a language to do in their own writing.
Right. And like you're mentioning here, the show don't tell thing is a huge part of that mysterious idea of compelling. So when you show, if you want to nail it down, when you show, what you're doing is leaving readers with a mental image or emotion. You have to let them imagine and fill in the gaps. Telling is the exact opposite. It's a statement of action or emotion. There are a lot of ways that you can show. Characterization is a good way to show. It allows people to imagine an entire person, which makes them feel more connected. Use of really rich adjectives does that. Action verbs as opposed to flat verbs like is, which is totally an important verb. Don't get me wrong. Among,
I think it's like 2 or 3 on the list.
It is. Among other methods of doing this, dialogue is one of them. And we're going to dedicate specific episodes to those because this is such an important thing and it's so big. But one place where people get into trouble is trying to just straight up explain everything. And so they don't leave space for conversation and movement and description and emotion and interaction. So there's no space for the reader to imagine. And that's doable in the target language. It can feel like because of the really limited vocab that you can't do that. You can. And you can actually do it at a low level too.
Yes, and today we're going to introduce you to that idea by looking at some scenes that we've written to be like, here's why this is showing. And it's just an introduction. We'll go detailed into more detail with some later episodes, but we just want to show you some ones that we've written at different levels to get you an idea of what that might look like. So I'm going to talk about a scene in Ridiculi et Horribilis Dei et Dei. And as soon as it comes up, I'll walk through it.
So this was written at a pretty low level. This is intended for Latin 1 students, right?
Yeah, more or less. It depends on whether you're teaching it or they're reading independently
Right.
and the vocab that the kids know for
Yes.
the most part. So I wrote this, it's in a part of the story, Queres et Sirenes. It's the last short story in the book. And what has just happened is that Proserpina is missing, and Carries doesn't know where she is. And she goes to the nymphs, and she has this like long list of, where is my daughter? She's not here, she's not here, she's not here. And the repetition is great because it's repeating in the language, and I want that repetition for the kids, but it's also revealing like where she is, how many places she's been, and kind of her emotional state. And then I love this part. The first nymph looks at the second nymph, and the third looks at and nobody is looking at Cares. And we have this stock idea when we think that someone is lying, is that they don't make eye contact. They're looking anywhere but at the person. And so you can kind of see them with this long pause, especially because there's that big break between, do you know where she is? And then there's a whole bunch of sentences about people not looking at each other. And then we start with the I don't know where she is. And then immediately our second nymph goes, I also don't know where she is. And then the third nymph is like, I have lots of feels right now. I kind of want to cry. I don't really know what to do. I know where she is, but she doesn't want to say it. So later I say that they're lying. I don't say that they're lying, but it's so clear here that the nymphs are not telling the truth. And Carries misses it, but she's also really obviously anxious about her daughter. And I don't say that she's anxious, but I do later. Like, it's okay to do that. But here I build out the scene and I show some of the feelings that all the characters have without actually stating what those feels are.
And one way
So
to do that, if you're going to state the feels, is so for example, you could say, queres ansia rogat. And that is a stronger statement than queres ansia est. Because there's
yes,
movement, there's behavior in that.
yes. And then how this scene might be different if I were just showing versus telling, it would be like, Carries goes to the nymphs. Carries sees the nymphs. Carries asks, where is Proserpina? The nymphs do not respond. Carries goes away. Like, that's not interesting. There's no like character information. You don't have any of the feels associated with Carrie's anxiety. You don't see that the nymphs are lying and that they know more information than what they're saying. Or you could even say the nymphs know where Proserpina is, but don't tell her. By adding these extra details, and like you said, the accordion, by filling out that information, it makes it a more hopefully compelling scene and gives more characterization. So this
Yeah.
is my lower level example of what showing might look like.
And I think you hit the nail on the head here. Two of the major tools that you've used here to show and not tell are dialogue and characterization. You have told us about the nymph, the third one. You have illustrated Cares's emotions. Here we know something about mom. We know something about that third nymph. I don't know jack about the first or second nymph, but I mean,
Third one has guilt.
but the
She's
third
so
one I know
conflicted.
something about, and I can empathize with that. I've been there. I know how that feels. I've also been the kid standing at the teacher's desk when the teacher says, "Where's your homework?" And I'm going, I don't know. I don't know what homework is. That's not real.
I've
Um,
never seen it before in my life.
right. And so even though we're getting across the same idea, they look at each other. The first nymph says she doesn't know. The second nymph says she doesn't know. What we've done here is create empathy. I've been there. I know that feeling, and I can see these people, and that's a huge deal. So,
Yeah,
by contrast, this is an excerpt from Roma Fairwain's, which I think is the only work of mine you haven't read. Um,
it's true.
this is a choose your own adventure novel that I'm in the middle of writing with two of my kids. So shout out to the two of them. And this is fairly obviously, I think, set during the Great Fire of Rome. Our character is Felix. He is an Ethiopian kid, half Ethiopian kid. We're staying in a cowpona. This is a cowpona in the nighttime. It's low class and it's dangerous, and we're worried. And Felix is asleep. So some tools that we have here, right? The first thing is there's olfactory description. We know what it smells like. I know that when I try, or that when there's a bad smell, I try not to like breathe and smell it. We know, right, we know what the guy looks like. He's big, he's intimidating, he's gross. There's the sound of footsteps. You can begin to put yourself in the situation. Now, this is written for level 3. So I have a richer vocabulary available to me than Rachel does, which is why I can do this. But that's a very real way of showing, is creating the scene. What would you hear? What would you see? What would you smell? And then there's suddenly a motivation. You hear it again. And then you remember an important thing. And then you get defensive. How am I feeling about this? This is my mother's. Hands off, fool. And here's why that's really important to me. We're explaining here why this is a motivation, why this is important, adding to our character and our thought process. And then there's a really strong action. There is very clear tension in the way that the mom is talking. She is quiet, but she's not soft about it. And sometimes framing action after dialogue can create that kind of tension, which is what's going on here. You hear the noise, and then there's a shining candelabrum in her hand, and I haven't told you what she's going to do with it, but you know why she's holding it. And sometimes that's part of it too, is leaving out a piece of information so that people can draw that bridge themselves. Again, here, I don't have a word for sarcastic in this book. I don't have decox. I don't have salsus. I don't have any of these words. But you know that he's sassing her. What are you going to do? You're going to kill me?
What are you going to do? Right. You can't do anything. I'm
going to attack me. That's your plan? And he's like sitting there dangling it in front of her. There's not as much dialogue in this scene as there is in Rachel's.
Oh my God. Sorry, I just feel like that relating moment that we were talking about earlier, where you're like the monkey in the middle and you can't get your stuff, and maybe it's just me because I was bullied, but you know, it's a very relatable thing where there's someone bigger than you and they have something that you want and they're being a jerk about it.
Yeah.
It's definitely a universal experience.
It is. So I haven't used dialogue as a tool as much as Rachel did. And it's a really good tool. What I've relied on here is sense understanding. What would you be feeling in the situation? What would you be hearing to create tension and to create emotional relationship? And this is at level 3. So this is very doable across the board. And let me stop sharing. Rachel, what do you feel like that scene would sound like if it were just being narrated?
There is a big dude. He's big.
You're scared.
I'm scared. He took something that belongs to me. I am mad and scared. Suddenly, I see my mom. My mom has a thing, and the dude is a jerk.
Right. And that is, I mean, that is obviously, you know, hyperbole there. It's obviously hyperbole, but essentially you hear footsteps. There's a man in the room. He's large. You're afraid. It smells bad. He has your mom's bag. You're angry about that. Your mom's bag is important. You don't know what to do. You turn around. Your mom is there. And there's no sensory information. I don't have a reason to be scared. I wrote this scene, and every time I look at it, my heart goes, like, I know what's going to happen. They're okay, by the way. They do not die at this time. But yeah, it leaves out the sensory information. And the dialogue does play a role here. So you were mentioning earlier that it is okay to describe.
Yeah, I have more than once, on many occasion, written that a character is angry or sad.
Yeah.
But I'm not only doing that. And then sometimes you reveal that information like later. Like what I did with the lying is that she finds out they're liars, and later she busts out that word mendax. Only there's three of them, so mendaces. And it's okay to do that too, to build up the scene where you see all those feels, and then to like kind of cap it off with that little like he's sad or she's sad or
Well, and you can't
um,
unaccordion everything that you write. You know, we would have
yeah,
953-page books. Narration exists for a reason. Sometimes you have to
yes.
collapse time.
And we do have limited vocabulary, which is a real challenge that we have when we're writing novellas for our students.
Yeah.
So like sometimes we're going to do that. We want them to know the word angry because we want them to be able to say I'm angry. Hopefully
Right.
they're not, but still, like we want to give them that vocabulary, so we want them to know it.
Right. Right. Well, and so I think for teachers who are sitting there wondering, okay, well now I get it, whatever, but how do I do that? Couple really quick, easy pieces of advice. You have to limit your language, so pick really rich language. Lean on really strong language. Lean on your imagination. Say to yourself, what would be going on in this room if this were happening? If I were watching it, what would be going on? And then say, okay, what words do I have to describe that?
Yep. I mean, there wasn't a lot of vocabulary to flesh out some of these scenes, so it's possible.
Yeah.
You just have to be really purposeful and then creative and imaginative in how you approach it when you're writing in target language.
Yeah. If you can relate to your characters and if you can relate to the scene, if you can say to yourself, no, I totally understand the motivation here. And I could understand the motivation if I hadn't just written it myself. Then you're probably doing okay. We do have to wrap up.
Yeah.
I think we're running a little long, but um, I am excited to say that the next time we will be chatting with Emma Vanderpool about her writing process. If you don't know Emma, you should immediately find out who that is because when I grow up, I want to be Emma. Um, she wrote Sakri Puli and some other things, and those are all findable on Amazon. So you should look her up. Any last thoughts, Rachel?
I don't know whether I should show the thoughts or tell the thoughts.
Tell the thoughts. We only have so much time.
Okay, my thought is that this is a really big topic, and this is just kind of like a teaser taster, even though we've spent some time talking about it. It's big. We're going to come back to it. So
It's true.
thank
So
you
keep
for
an eye out for
joining us today.
those. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, scrivite bonis avibus.
Yep. And
Facete
facete.
valeatis.